The first time they called her useless, Lyra was 8 years old and standing in the training ring with blood on her lip. The blood wasn't from battle. It was from biting down so hard on her own fear that her teeth had broken the skin. She could taste iron as she stood barefoot in the packed earth, surrounded by the sounds of shifting bones and excited yips. The other pups had already begun to change. On one side of the ring, Cade, the beta's son, shrugged off his tunic with a cocky grin, rolled his shoulders, and let the shift take him. His body bowed and twisted as his spine elongated, for streaming over skin in a familiar ripple. In the space of a breath, the boy was gone and a lanky golden wolf stood in his place, tail swishing proudly. He shook himself once and then trotted in an easy circle, soaking away the watching adults smiled and murmured their approval. Around him, other pups followed suit, bones cracked and rearranged, the air filled with a musky scent of fur and adrenaline. There were clumsy yelps as paws that weren't used to holding weight slid in the dirt, a few little snarls as they playfully snapped at each other. Cade shifted first again. One of the warrior females said, arms folded, pride in her voice, "He's going to be strong." As expected from a future beta, another replied. Lyra watched them from the edge of the ring, hands balled tight at her sides. The late afternoon sun had warmed the earth beneath her bare feet, but her skin prickled with cold. "Lyra," her father's voice was gentle but firm behind her, "it's your turn." She swallowed and nodded, though every instinct in her screamed to run back to their small hut and hide under a blanket until moon passed and took everyone's expectations with it. The pack elders stood in a line on the far side of the ring, leaning on carved walking sticks, feathers and beads woven into their gray hair. Their gazes were like weight on her shoulders. Aunt Mara, who wasn't truly her aunt, but everyone called her that, folded her arms and raised her brow. "Come on, little fox," she called. "Stop letting the boys show you up." "I'm a wolf," Lyra muttered automatically. "Then prove it," Aunt Mara replied, though there was no malice in her tone. Lyra stepped toward the center of the ring. The ground here was scuffed with paw prints and dried mud, the air thick with the scent of sweat and fur. A ring of adults and half-shifted teens surrounded the space, their eyes bright with curiosity. "She'll do it this time," a woman whispered. "She has to. 8 is old enough." "Old enough?" a man snorted softly. Cade first shifted at 6. "Yes, well, he's the beta's boy. The moon always favors the powerful." Lyra pretended not to hear them. She raised her chin and fixed her gaze on the center stake, a rough-hewn post driven into the earth for training drills. Her father came to stand beside her. He wasn't the tallest wolf in the pack, but he was quick and clever, a scout who knew every whispering path of the forest. Today his dark hair was tied back, his jaw clean-shaven for the formal occasion. Worry had carved new lines around his eyes. He crouched so he was level with her. "Remember what I told you," he said quietly. "Shifting isn't about forcing your body. It's about listening." "To what?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. He rested his hand over her heart. "To this. Your inner wolf is here. You just have to feel for her. Trust her." Lyra nodded because that's what she was supposed to do. But inside, panic fluttered like a trapped bird. What if there was nothing to feel? "Close your eyes," one of the elders ordered. Lyra obeyed. The world dimmed, the noise of the pup's playful growls fading into a dull hum. She could smell the tang of pine sap from the trees beyond the training field, the faint smokiness from the cooking fires back in the main settlement, the sweat of nerves on her own skin. "Reach inward," another elder said, "to the part of you that is older than your bones, the part that remembers the forest, the hunt, the moon. Call her." Lyra inhaled slowly. In her mind, she pictured a door. The elders always talked about it this way, a threshold inside yourself. On one side, your human self. On the other, your wolf. You open the door, and the wolf stepped through. Simple. Natural. She reached for the door. There was nothing. Just darkness. Just her own thin breath echoing back at her. She fumbled, searching deeper. Maybe the door was lower, hidden behind another feeling. She looked for the burning heat the older teens had described before their first shift. The sudden pressure under the skin, the tingling in limbs, the taste of lightning on the tongue. All she found was silence. Her fingers curled into fists so tight her nails bit into her palms. Come on, she begged herself. Come on. Shift, shift, shift. Her shoulders trembled with the effort. Her lungs ached. The darkness inside her remained smooth and still, like the surface of a pond with nothing beneath it. Anything? The first elder asked, impatience edging his voice. Lyra opened her eyes. No, she whispered. The murmurs began immediately, soft and sharp and impossible to ignore. Still nothing. At 8? That's not a good sign. Maybe she's just a late bloomer, someone offered half-heartedly. That's not how it works. The moon calls us all. If it hasn't answered by now. Her father straightened, jaw tightening. She's trying, he said, his voice low. Cade trotted closer on 4 paws, his golden fur gleaming in the light. He shook himself, then let his shift fall away, body snapping back to human with casual ease. He stood there, bare-chested and smirking, wiping a stray fleck of foam from his lip. You see, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I can shift twice in one day already. She hasn't even done it once. Cade. His father warned, but the warning lacked teeth. The beta looked more proud than angry. Lyra felt her cheeks burn. I will, she muttered. I just need. What? Cade sneered. Another year? Another excuse. Some of the pups snickered. Lyra took a step toward him, fists clenched. I will shift. When? He demanded. When the moon falls out of the sky. He snorted. Face it, Lyra, you're just useless. The words sliced straight through her. The ring went quiet. Even the elders didn't rebuke him. The silence was worse than laughter. It was agreement. Lyra's vision blurred for a heartbeat. The world felt too bright, too sharp. Her father's hand landed on her shoulder. That's enough for today, he said tightly. The moon will come again. We will try again. Try all you like, someone muttered from the crowd. She doesn't have it. The training ring shifted back into its usual noisy chaos, as if nothing important had happened. The pups tumbled and played. Adults resumed their conversations. But circles of whispers spun through the crowd, and Lyra could feel every one of them like a stone against her skin. She let her father guide her away. They walked in silence through the settlement. Their pack, the Hollow Ridge pack, wasn't large, but it was old. Wooden cabins ringed the central fire pit, smoke curling lazily into the late-day sky. Meat dried on racks. Children chased each other between rain barrels and stacked firewood. Tanned hides hung from lines. Lyra usually loved it all. The smell of roasting venison, the sound of laughter, the way everything felt close and familiar. Tonight, all she felt were eyes on her back. They passed a pair of older women drawing water from the well. One of them lowered her voice, but not enough. Poor thing, she murmured. It would have been kinder if she'd been born to a human village. At least then there'd be no expectations. Or use, the other said. Here she'll just take up space. Lyra's stomach sank. Her father heard. His hand tightened on her shoulder again, fingers digging in for a moment before he forced them to relax. Inside their small hut at the edge of the settlement, it was dim and warm. The air was scented with dried herbs and a faint, lingering ghost of her mother's perfume. Clover and rain. Her mother had died 2 winters ago, taken by a fever no healer could break. She had been the one who told Lyra stories of brave wolves and shining moon gifts, who promised her that when her time came to shift, she would be magnificent. You'll be stronger than all of them, she had whispered in the dark, stroking Lyra's hair. They'll see. Now she was gone, and Lyra stood in the middle of their one-room home, feeling very small. Her father busied himself with pointless tasks. He straightened the blankets on her bedroll, rearranged a stack of folded clothes, adjusted a spear tip on the wall that didn't need adjusting. Papa, Lyra said finally. He froze, then turned to face her. His eyes were a soft brown like hers, but tonight they were tight with something like guilt. I'm sorry, she whispered. His face crumpled. No, he said, crossing the room in 2 strides to kneel in front of her. Lyra, no, you have nothing to be sorry for. I tried, she said. Tears burned her eyes, blurring his face. I really tried. There's nothing there. There is, he insisted, his hands gentle on her arms. They're wrong about you. Are they? She asked, voice cracking. Everyone else shifted by now. Cade's already running laps around the patrols. Even Mira can half shift her claws. I can't even feel it, Papa. What if I don't have a wolf at all? The words tasted bitter even as she said them. The worst fear spoken out loud. Her father closed his eyes for a moment, as if the thought physically hurt him. When he opened them again, they were fierce. The moon does not make mistakes, he said firmly. You are my daughter. Your blood is Holleridge and something else besides. Your mother used to say you were born on a strange night, remember? Lyra did. She'd heard the story a dozen times. How the sky had been clear and cloudless, the moon full and bright, and yet a shower of falling stars had streaked across the horizon like silver rain just as she'd taken her first breath. Maybe the moon was distracted, Lyra muttered. He huffed a laugh to spite himself. You are not a mistake, he repeated more softly. Listen to me. Some wolves shift early. Some shift late. Some need a harder call from the moon. That's all. Everyone thinks I'm useless, she whispered. He flinched at the word. Everyone is a fool, he said roughly. I've seen you track better than half the scouts. You can climb trees Cade wouldn't even try. You hear birds before they land, and you know when the forest is holding its breath. That is not useless. But it's not a wolf, she said. Not yet, he conceded. But it will be. I believe that with everything in me. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to take his words and wrap them around herself like armor. But the ring had been full of wolves. She had been the only human. Her father sighed and cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Take tonight, he said. Rest. Tomorrow, if you want, we'll go out past the North Ridge. Just you and me. We'll try again where it's quiet. Lyra nodded numbly. He kissed her forehead, then rose and moved to start the evening fire. The familiar scrape of flint on stone filled the hut. Lyra stood there for a moment longer, then quietly slipped outside. The sky had deepened into velvet blue by the time she crossed the settlement. The moon, a huge pale disk, was lifting slowly over the treetops. Voices drifted from the central fire, where the pack shared stories and food. Lyra heard bursts of laughter, the crackle of flames, someone boasting loudly about a patrol skirmish. She turned away. Instead of joining them, she passed through the last ring of cabins and down the narrow path leading into the woods. The trees welcomed her with creaking branches and the scent of moss and damp earth. Here, at least, nothing expected anything of her. She walked barefoot, the cool soil and occasional sharp twig grounding her in the moment. The sound of the settlement faded until all she could hear were the chirp of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. She didn't stop until the trees grew taller and older, their trunks thicker, roots twisting like sleeping beasts. This was the oldest part of the forest, a place the elders called Moonshadow Grove. The air here always felt a little different, thicker, deeper. She stepped into a small clearing where the canopy opened just enough to let moonlight pour down in a silver column. The grass here was soft and short, dotted with tiny white flowers that only opened at night. Lyra moved to the center of the clearing and tilted her face up to the sky. The moon hung above her, full and bright and impossibly far away. For a moment, anger flared in her chest, hot and sharp and unfamiliar. You're supposed to be our mother, she said aloud. Her voice sounded small beneath the vastness of the night. You're supposed to call us. Why didn't you call me? The only answer was the distant rustle of leaves. Lyra sank to her knees, fingers digging into the cool earth. Her throat tightened, and the words spilled out in a rush, tumbling over each other. Please, she whispered. I don't want to be useless. I don't want them to look at me the way they do. I don't want my father to have to defend me all the time. I just want to be a wolf like everyone else. Tears slipped free, hot streaks down her cheeks. Please, she said again, softer. Please. I'll do anything. I'll train twice as hard. I'll take the worst patrols. Just let me shift. Let me be something. Silence. The sort of silence that wasn't empty, but held its breath. Lyra pressed her palms flat to ground, feeling for anything: warmth, a tug, a spark. After a few heartbeats, she almost gave up, then so faintly she almost missed it, she felt something pulse beneath her skin. It wasn't the roaring fire everyone had described. It wasn't the burn of bones ready to break and remake. It was a flicker, a tiny, cool spark deep, deep down. Not a wolf, not like the others. Something older, wilder, like a presence sleeping in the roots of a mountain, like a shadow cast by light that hadn't yet reached the world. It stirred in response to her reaching, slow and cautious, as if surprised to be noticed. Lyra's breath caught. "There," she whispered, fingers curling into the grass. "I feel something. Is that you? Is that my wolf?" The thing, whatever it was, quivered, stretching like a creature waking from a long, long sleep. For a heartbeat, she had the strange sensation of eyes opening in the dark. They were not wolf eyes. They were wider, vast, like distant stars. A shiver ran through her entire body. Then fear, sharp and instinctive, stabbed at her chest. What if this wasn't her wolf? What if this was something wrong? Something the elders would whisper about with pale faces and accident in their eyes? What if this was exactly the kind of thing that got you locked away or sent out of the territory for the good of the pack? Her uncertainty cracked the fragile connection. The presence recoiled, slipping back into the depths of herself like a shadow vanishing when clouds covered the moon. "Wait!" Lyra reached for it again, panicked. "Don't go!" But it was gone. The sudden emptiness inside her felt even worse than before. She sat there in the clearing under the full, unblinking moon, feeling more alone than she ever had in her life. "Of course," she whispered bitterly. "Even my whatever that was doesn't want to stay." A breeze brushed through the grove, making the flowers tremble. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, rich and powerful. Lyra listened to it for a long time, throat tight. Eventually, she got to her feet. Her knees ached, her palms were stained green, and her eyes were puffy from crying. She wiped her face roughly on her sleeve. "Fine," she told the night, even though her voice shook. "Don't help me. I'll figure out myself." She turned and began the slow walk back toward the settlement, the moonlight painting the path in pale silver. Behind her, in the quiet clearing, the air shivered once as if something unseen had shifted. Deep inside Lyra, far beneath her awareness, that ancient flicker of strange power didn't vanish entirely. It curled up, small and patient, like an old creature deciding, for the first time in a very long time, to watch. 10 years after the night she begged the moon for a wolf, Lyra woke to the sound of drums. They weren't the fast, frantic beats of an alarm. Those meant rogues or fire or something worse. These were slower, measured, formal, announcement drums. Lyra lay still for a moment, staring at the low ceiling of the hut as the sound rolled through the trees and across the settlement. Each thud vibrated faintly in the floor beneath her bedroll. Her father, already up and fastening his worn leather jerkin, glanced over. "You're awake." "Hard not to be," she mumbled, pushing herself up on her elbows. Her muscles ached pleasantly from yesterday's chores. "What's going on?" "Council meeting." If it were just council, they'd use the horn. He finished tying off his armor and reached for his boots. "This is bigger." "Bigger how?" He hesitated a fraction of a second before answering, and that was the first sign something was wrong. "Get dressed," he said. "You'll hear with everyone else." That was not reassuring. Lyra rolled out of bed with a quiet groan and went to the small chest at the foot of her sleeping mat. She pulled out a clean tunic and trousers, plain, but at least without patches, and tugged them on quickly. As she braided her hair back from her face, she caught a glimpse of herself in the bit of polished metal hanging on the wall. Same girl, same dark eyes, same faint sprinkle of freckles across her nose, same human. At 18, she still hadn't shifted. Not fully. Once in a while, under the right phase of the moon, something inside her would stretch. Her fingers would ache with the need to lengthen. Her teeth would itch, Her hearing would sharpen until she could pick out individual birdsong threads in the forest tapestry. But then the change would seize up, stutter, and snap back like a pulled bowstring released too soon. A half-formed growl in her throat would die as a cough. Her nails never quite made it to claws. The elders had stopped calling her to the ring years ago. Now she trained in other ways. With knives, with staff, with her bare hands. She ran the forest paths until her lungs burned and her legs shook. She learned to move silently and hit hard. If she couldn't be a wolf, she'd be something else useful. Most of the pack did not care. Some did. Her father, Aunt Mara, a few of the older scouts who appreciated anyone willing to pull their weight. Most, though, when they looked at her, Lyra saw in their eyes that thin sheen of polite pity, the tightening at the corners of mouths, the knowledge that in a pack built around teeth and claws and fur, a wolf who could not shift was always going to be wrong. The drum sounded again, 3 final, heavy beats. Her father buckled his belt and slung his bow over his shoulder. Come on. They stepped out into the crisp morning air together. The settlement was already stirring more than usual. Wolves emerged from cabins, pulling on cloaks, adjusting weapons, calling to pups to hurry. Smoke curled from chimneys, catching in the light that filtered through the trees. What's happening? Lyra asked a passing hunter. The woman half shrugged. Heard the alpha got a messenger late last night. Outsider. Important enough to rattle him. She frowned. Drums say all pack. Could be war news. War. The word dropped like a stone into Lyra's stomach. Rumors have been circling the territories for the last 2 years. Rogue packs abandoning old odes, border skirmishes that left entire families dead, whispers of strange alliances forming in secret. Twice, Hollow Ridge hunters had returned with wounds that smelled of unfamiliar wolves. Once, they'd found a torn-up campsite just outside their border, blood soaked into dirt, but no bodies. The elders said it was a bad sign when even the dead were gone. Lyra fell into step beside her father as they headed toward the central clearing. If it is war, she said quietly, we're not exactly ready. They had fewer warriors now than they'd had when she was a child. A bad winter, a sickness, a failed harvest. It had all taken its toll. Her father hummed noncommittally. Ready or not doesn't stop war from coming. In the central clearing, the entire pack gathered in a loose semicircle around a speaking stone, a large flat-top boulder mottled with lichen. The alpha, Rowan, stood upon it, broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with early gray. His mate, Alara, stood just below, wrapped in a deep green cloak, eyes scanning the crowd like falcons. Beta Corin and his son, Cade, took their places to Rowan's right. Cade, taller now, filled out, still inconveniently good-looking, wore a satisfied expression that made Lyra's jaw clench automatically. Aunt Mara stood near the front, staff in hand, silver hair braided with bits of bone and feather. She caught Lyra's eye and gave a small, reassuring nod. Lyra drifted toward her father splitting off to join the other scouts. Rowan waited until the mutters and shuffling died down. Then he lifted his chin. Wolves of Hollow Ridge, he called, his voice carrying easily. We have received word from the High Mountain Pack. A ripple moved through the crowd. High Mountain. Even Lyra, who tried to keep out of the densest knots of gossip, knew that name. Everyone did. They were the largest pack in the territories, controlling the massive mountain range to the north and several valleys at its base. Old, powerful, disciplined. They had more warriors than 3 smaller packs combined. Their territory was rich with minerals, clean streams, game. And at their head was the Alpha King, Kieran Thorne. Lyra had heard stories about him for years. Some made him sound like a monster, brutal, merciless, made of iron and snow. Others painted him as a stern but fair ruler, the only thing keeping the territories from collapsing into chaos entirely. It depended on who you asked. She tensed without meaning to. Rowan continued. King Kieran rides for Hollow Ridge. He will be here by nightfall. The clearing erupted. What? The Alpha King here? Why us? Are we in trouble? Quiet, Ilara snapped, her voice slicing neatly through the noise. The pack subsided again, though the air remained charged. Why is he coming? Someone called from the back. Rowan's jaw worked. The High Mountain Pack has seen increasing rogue activity along their eastern borders, he said. He is visiting several packs in this region to assess strength, negotiate alliances, and make decisions. Decisions. That could mean a lot of things. Is he seeking tribute? A merchant asked. Or conscripts? A younger warrior added uneasily. Does he expect us to send our fighters to his wars? Corin snorted softly. He doesn't have to ask, he muttered, a bit too loudly. He orders. Ilera shot him a warning look. Rowan lifted his hands. We don't know yet what he'll want, he said. But we will show him we are not weak. We will show him Hollow Ridge stands ready to defend its borders and honor its neighbors. Beside Lyra, Aunt Mara made a low, doubtful noise in her throat. We don't have the numbers for a war, she murmured under her breath. Even a fledgling one. Lyra swallowed. A pack that couldn't even fully trust its own wolves was about to stand in front of the Alpha King of the realm and pretend everything was fine. Preparations begin now, Ilera announced. We'll host them properly. Hunters, you'll bring in your best game today. Kitchen hands, double your efforts. We want to feast on the tables by moonrise. Warriors, you'll drill. Hard. We will not embarrass ourselves. Her gaze swept the crowd like a knife. It snagged on Lyra, only for a moment, but long enough that Lyra felt like a physical touch. Sharp, assessing, faintly disdainful. Then Ilera looked away. Dismissed, Rowan said. The crowd broke apart into clusters and currents of motion. Orders were shouted, tools grabbed, arguments sparked. Aunt Mara tapped her staff twice on the ground. With me, she said to Lyra, then began striding toward the storage huts without waiting to see if she followed. Lyra did. How bad is it, really? Lyra asked as they walked. If he's riding out himself, I mean... Aunt Mara snorted. Kings don't saddle their own horses for nothing, she said. Either he needs something big, or he wants something bigger. That's comforting. You wanted comfort. You should have been born in a story and not a war season. But her mouth twitched just slightly. Listen, whatever happens, keep your head down. Don't draw attention. Lyra huffed a humorless laugh. When do I ever? Aunt Mara gave her a sideways look. You'd be surprised. Sometimes the things people try hardest to hide are the brightest lights in the room. Lyra didn't have an answer for that. The day blurred into motion. Hunters fanned out into the forest, returning hours later with deer and boar slung over shoulders. Smoke rose from the cooking fires, carrying with it the mouth-watering scent of roasting meat, herbs, and fresh bread. The pups were scrubbed clean and ordered to stay out of the way. The training ring echoed with the sounds of weapons clashing and shouted commands. Lyra spent most of the afternoon in the kitchens. Ilera had seen her once in the clearing, taken in her very human lack of claws and fur, and said briskly, We need hands here. Move. Lyra moved. She chopped vegetables until her fingers felt numb, carried heavy pots of water from the well, gutted fish, and plucked birds. The kitchen was a chaos of steam and shouting and clattering dishes, but at least here she knew what to do. There, Aunt Mara said at one point, jerking her chin to a rack of hanging herbs. Grab time, not sage. You always reach for the sage. Overpowers the meat. Lyra smirked. Maybe I like overpowered things. Some things. Not the Alpha King's temper. That one's strong enough as it is, from what I've heard. Lyra's curiosity pricked again, sharpened by the constant undercurrent of tension in the air. What have you heard? She asked quietly. Aunt Mara glanced around to see who was in earshot, then lowered her voice. High Mountain raised him hard, she said. His father died young. His mother wasn't much better. He took the title earlier than he should have had to. The first few years were nothing but blood and bruises, as he beat the neighboring alphas into line. He sounds charming. He's alive, Aunt Mara said dryly. And so are most of his people. In times like these, that counts more than charm. Lyra thought about that as she kneaded dough. A leader who kept his people alive, no matter how harshly, was better than one who smiled while his pack starved. Still, the idea of that man, this distant iron-willed figure from stories, standing in their rough-hewn hall, looking at their cracked plaster and worn tables and dwindling warriors. Lyra's chest tightened. "We'll look small," she said quietly. "We are small," Ammar replied. "But small packs can still bite. Don't forget that." Lyra tried to hold on to that thought. By the time the sun dipped low, the settlement had been scrubbed and swept within an inch of its life. Lanterns were hung from eaves and branches, their yellow light casting a warm glow over the clearing. Tables were dragged out, laden with food, roasted venison glazed with honey, thick loaves of bread, bowls of stewed vegetables, pressed cheese. Lyra helped carry out the last platter, arms straining under the weight. She set it down carefully and straightened, rubbing her wrists. That's when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them, distant but closing fast. A hush rippled through the clearing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Wolves drifted toward the main path that led into the trees, forming a loose line. Lyra found herself hanging back automatically, half hidden near one of the cabins. She wasn't supposed to be part of the welcoming party. Wolves who didn't shift were for the background, the edges. Still, she craned her neck to see. The hoofbeats grew louder, accompanied now by the metallic jingle of harness and the faint clink of armor. Then, between the trees, shapes emerged. They came in a tight, disciplined formation, riders in dark leathers and reinforced plate, mounted on powerful horses with shining coats. Most packs prefer to travel in wolf form when not carrying large loads, but High Mountain had the kind of wealth and infrastructure that made horses practical. Lyra counted quickly. 12 riders, maybe 15. Enough to make a statement, not enough to be an invading force. At their head rode him, Kieran Thorne. Even from a distance, he was easy to pick out. He sat his horse with relaxed command, one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. His hair was dark, tied back at the nape of his neck. His jaw was clean-shaven, his features sharp, carved in lines of focus rather than softness. He wasn't monstrous. He wasn't glowing or surrounded by lightning or any of the exaggerated nonsense some stories had given him. What he was still, power coiled around him like a cloak, quiet but undeniable. The air seemed to tighten slightly as he rode into the clearing, as if everything in range had drawn a collective breath. Rowan stepped forward with Alara and Corin flanking him. Behind them, the strongest of Hollow Ridge's warriors arrayed themselves, trying to look more numerous than they were. "Alpha King Kieran," Rowan called, bowing his head respectfully but not fully. "Hollow Ridge welcomes you." Kieran drew his horse to a stop a few paces away. For a moment, he said nothing, simply letting his gaze sweep over the gathered wolves. Lyra felt it as it passed over her hiding place, a brief, cool brush that made her skin prickle. He moved on without pausing. "Alpha Rowan," Kieran said finally. His voice was smooth, deep, carrying without needing to be raised. "Thank you for your hospitality." He swung down from his horse in one fluid movement. No creak of armor, no stumble. Just a clean, practiced dismount. One of his warriors took the reins. Up close, the faint traces of where were more evident. A scar along his left jaw, another disappearing into his collar. The kind of marks you got from surviving real fights, not stage training. "High Mountain stands honored by your welcome," Kieran continued, though Lyra did miss the way his eyes flicked briefly to the worn edges of the cabins, the patched sections of the fence. He missed nothing. Alara stepped forward with a practiced smile. "We have prepared a feast in your honor, your majesty." "Then let's not keep it waiting," Kieran said. "My men have ridden far. We'll talk properly once they've eaten and washed the dust from their throats." It was a concession, a polite one. Lyra saw Rowan's shoulders ease almost imperceptibly. As the Alpha King and his warriors were led toward the main hall, Lyra finally got a closer look at the rest of the High Mountain group. They moved like a single unit. Even dismounting and handing off gear, their awareness of each other didn't break. Their eyes were sharp, scanning doorways, rooftops, tree lines. Some were older, with weathered faces. Others were closer to Lyra's age, but all shared the same lean, honed look. These were wolves who had seen real war. Lyra's fingers twitched restlessly at her sides. She'd never been more aware of her bare, human skin. Inside the hall, the noise and warmth hit like a wave. Long tables filled the space, candles flickering in iron sconces on the walls. Food was spread out, and as soon as the Alpha King took his seat at the head table, the feast began. Lyra wove between bodies with a pitcher in each hand, refilling cups as she went. It was easier to move than stand still. Standing still meant thinking. Thinking meant noticing the knot of tension in her chest. She passed behind Kieran once, close enough to catch his scent. Pine, steel, cold air, and something else, something sharp and clean, like lightning before a storm. He ate little, drank even less. Most of his attention was on Rowan, Ilera, and Corin, who did their best to present Hollow Ridge in a favorable light. Our hunters know every game trail from here to the southern ridge, Rowan was saying. We've held our borders against rogue incursions. We may be small, but we are not blind. Kieran suggested mildly, one brow lifting. Rowan's mouth flattened. Kieran took a slow sip from his cup. You've lost 3 warriors to skirmishes in the last year, he said. 2 to sickness the year before that, and another to a border dispute with Green Pine over a stream you ended up losing anyway. Rowan stiffened. You've been getting reports. Of course I have. Kieran's tone wasn't mocking, just factual. You're not the only ones, for what it's worth. Most packs have bled recently, some more than they admit. Lyra swallowed. The hall suddenly felt a little too warm. What do you want from us? Ilera asked, cutting to the point. Protection? Tribute? Warriors. Beside her, Corin grunted, clearly not thrilled with the last option. Kieran set his cup down. I want to see what you have before I decide what I want, he said. I don't demand tribute from wolves who can barely fill their own granaries. I don't ask for warriors from packs that can't spare them. But I don't know yet what you are. We are not beggars, Corin snapped, pride flaring. We stand on our own feet. For now, one of Kieran's warriors murmured under his breath, not quite quietly enough. Kieran shot him a quelling look. The warrior subsided. Lyra moved away before she could hear more, heart thudding. At the far end of the hall, pups clustered together, whispering excitedly and stealing glances at the Alpha King. Some mimed fighting motions, jabbing elbows into each other's sides. One little boy swung an imaginary sword with so much enthusiasm, he nearly toppled onto the table. In the shadows near the kitchen entrance, a pair of older teens glanced their way. Still hiding among the pots and pans, one snickered. Maybe if you bash the rogues with a soup ladle, they'll run. His friend smirked. She should go sit with the king. Maybe he'll be so impressed by a wolf who can't shift that'll make her queen. They snorted with laughter. Lyra's jaw tightened. She turned away, focusing on her task. She'd long since learned that feeding attention to that kind of cruelty only made it grow. Aunt Mara bumped her hip as she passed with a tray. Heads up, she murmured. He was about to ask for it. For what? Lyra asked. The show, Aunt Mara said grimly. Kings never visit without making you dance. Lyra frowned, but before she could ask what that meant, the hall quieted. Kieran had risen to his feet. He didn't need to shout to command attention. The simple act of standing was enough. Conversation died away, mugs lowered halfway to lips. I thank you for your hospitality, he said. The food is good. The company is interesting. A few wolves chuckled nervously. As I said earlier, Kieran continued, I don't make decisions about alliances blindly. Strength is not just in words or boasts. It is in bodies, in discipline, in how a pack moves together. His gaze swept the room. I would like to see your warriors, he said. Run, hunt, shift, let the moon see you. Rowan's face gave away nothing, but his hand tightened on the back of his chair. Of course, he said. We'll arrange a demonstration in the clearing under the moon. Good. Kieran's gaze moved again, lingering here and there. Lyra felt it brush over her once more, snagging for half a second on her face before sliding away. I'll be there. He sat back down. The hall erupted into a different kind of noise now, excited, anxious. Warriors straightened their shoulders, some rolling them as if already preparing. Pups glanced at each other with wide eyes. Aunt Mara exhaled through her nose. There it is. What? Lyra asked, though she thought she knew. The dance, Aunt Mara repeated. He wants to see our wolves under the moon. See if we're worth the trouble of saving or taking advantage of. Lyra swallowed hard. She watched countless moon drills from the edge of the ring over the years, always in human form. She knew the patterns by heart. The way wolves circled, lunged, snapped at the air, showing off speed and agility. The mock combats, the tracking displays. She had never been part of them. She assumed she wouldn't be now. She was wrong. Later, as the pack spilled out into the cool night air, Lyra found the nearest exterior wall and leaned against it, letting the chill soak into her overheated skin. The moon had risen fully, pale and watchful above the treetops. The clearing outside the hall was already being cleared of tables to make way for the demonstration. She'd just begun to feel like she could breathe again when Illyra's voice cut across the space. You. Lyra stiffened. Illyra approached, green cloak whispering around her ankles. Up close, her beauty was sharp, all angles in focus. Her eyes raked over Lyra, taking the plain clothes, the flowers still dusting her sleeves, the faint sweat at her temples. What are you doing lurking there? Illyra asked. There was no kindness in the question, only cool irritation. Helping in the kitchens, Lyra said. Her voice came out more steady than she felt. I was just stepping out for air. I'll get out of the way. She shifted to move aside. Illyra's fingers closed around her arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but close. No, the alpha's mate said slowly. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You'll be in the demonstration. For a heartbeat, Lyra wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. I what? Illyra tilted her head. You're a pack member, aren't you? You'll stand with your pack. We don't hide our variety from the Alpha King. Her tone turned the word variety into something almost filthy. Please, Lyra said, heat flooding her face. Her pulse sped up. You know I can't. Her father appeared at her shoulder, moving faster than she'd seen him move all night. Illyra, he said, voice tight. She's not ready for that. Weave, you know she... I know she's been given every chance to find her wolf, Illyra cut in, and failed. Her nails dug a little into Lyra's sleeve. I will not have us appear weaker, because we cower away our broken pieces. Lyra flinched at broken. Her father's fist clenched at his sides. No one is suggesting we cower. Then there's no problem, Illyra said, releasing Lyra's arm. She will stand in the ring with the others. If she shifts, the king sees a late-blooming miracle. If she doesn't, Illyra shrugged one delicate shoulder. He sees the truth of what we are. And what are we? Lyra asked quietly, surprising herself. Illyra's gaze pinned her for a heartbeat. Lyra almost saw something like envy in her expression. It vanished too quickly, to be sure. We, Illyra said, are a pack that doesn't lie about what is. She turned and strode away, cloak swirling. Lyra stood frozen. Beside her, her father swore under his breath, a raw, ugly word she'd only ever heard in drunk warriors' mouths. I'll talk to Rowan, he said. He'll see sense. He will listen to his mate, Aunt Mara said grimly, appearing as silently as if she'd stepped out of shadows themselves. And she's already decided this makes us look honest instead of pathetic. Lyra swallowed past a hard lump in her throat. Papa, she said, barely more than a breath, if you fight this and lose, it'll make things worse. I don't care, he snapped. I won't have them. You can't protect her from everything, Aunt Mara cut in, not unkindly. And that includes the Alpha King. He rounded on her. So, we just throw her in front of him? Let him judge her like livestock. He's judging all of us, Aunt Mara said. If we hide her, he'll see that too. And he'll start wondering what else we're hiding. Silence fell for a moment. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt like a rabbit caught between two hungry wolves. I'll do it, she said. Both adults looked at her sharply. Lyra, her father began. I'll do it, she repeated, forcing her voice to stay steady. Standing in the ring won't suddenly make me more useless than I already am, right? He flinched. She regretted the jab immediately, but she couldn't take it back. Maybe, she swallowed, maybe something will happen. Maybe it won't. Either way, at least it's not more hiding. Her father looked torn between pride and terror. He reached for her, gripping her shoulders. Look at me. She did. If at any point you feel unsafe, he said, you leave the ring. I don't care who is watching. You hear me? Yes, she whispered. Aunt Mara's rough. Warm hand landed briefly on the back of her neck. Listen for yourself, she murmured, echoing his old advice. Not for them. Whatever happens, remember that. Lyra nodded, though her stomach had twisted into a tight knot. The training ring looked different at night. Lanterns hung from posts around its perimeter, casting pools of golden light onto the packed earth. Beyond their glow, the forest loomed in deeper shadow. The moon watched overhead, a pale, unblinking eye. The entire pack gathered around the ring, forming a thick circle of bodies. At one end, on a slightly raised platform, Kieran stood with a few of his warriors. His arms were folded over his chest, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. Lyra took her place among the Hollow Ridge wolves called to demonstrate. They were all in their late teens and 20s, the strongest fighters Rowan could present. Cade, of course, was front and center, rolling his shoulders, golden hair catching the lantern light. He glanced at Lyra and frowned. What are you doing here? He muttered. Apparently, I'm part of the entertainment, Lyra said dryly, keeping her gaze fixed ahead. Try not to let me steal your spotlight. His nostrils flared. If you make us look weak in front of him. I've been making us look weak for 10 years, she said before she could stop herself. Don't act like tonight will be the first time. The words slipped out sharper than she'd intended. Cade blinked, taken aback, then scowled. You're not funny. Neither are you. That's why I don't laugh at you. Before it could respond, Rowan stepped into the ring. Tonight, he called, voice ringing out, we stand before the Alpha King and the moon to show what Hollow Ridge can do. You know the pattern. You know the drills. Give everything. Hold nothing back. He stepped out again, joining Alara near the Alpha King's platform. Kieran's gaze swept over the line of Hollow Ridge wolves, pausing for a fraction of a second when it landed on Lyra. His eyes narrowed slightly. Begin, he said. Around Lyra, the others shifted. It was like a wave crashing down the line. Cracks and pops, bodies bending, fur racing across skin. In seconds, the ring was filled with wolves in shades of brown, gray, black, and gold, shaking out their coats, flexing claws, baring teeth. Lyra stood in the middle of them, human and trembling. The familiar humiliation burned hot under her skin. The urge to run pressed hard against her ribs. But another, stubborn part of her rooted her feet to the ground. She lifted her chin. The first drill began. Circle runs. The wolves fanned out, sprinting around the ring's edge, kicking up dust. They flowed in smooth arcs, weaving between each other without colliding, muscles bunching and stretching under their fur. Lyra stayed in the center, resisting the urge to move, to fidget. She could feel eyes on her, judging, weighing, whispering, her father's gaze. Aunt Mara's, Ilara's, sharp and satisfied, Rowan's tight-mouthed, and Kieran's. When the runs ended, the wolves moved into mock combat. They paired off, lunging, snapping, rolling, the air filled with snarls and the thud of bodies hitting the ground. Lyra's heart pounded harder with each passing moment. She could feel it again, that strange, cool presence deep inside her, like a creature stirring in its sleep. The same one she'd touched, so briefly, in the moonlit grove years ago. It was closer tonight, not a wolf. A panic part of her brain insisted. Not normal, not safe, but the rest of her reached for anyway. The drills ended. Rowan looked at Kieran. Your Majesty, he said, we've shown you their speed, their combat, and their discipline. Kieran acknowledged. He tilted his head slightly, eyes on Lyra. But you didn't answer my question. Rowan's brows knit. What question? Kieran nodded toward the ring. Is she too young to shift? The words cut through the night like a blade. Every eye swung to Lyra. Her breath caught. Rowan hesitated, just long enough for everyone to notice. Ilara's jaw clenched. Lyra wanted the ground to open up and swallow her, or the trees to reach down and pluck her away, or for the moon to finally take pity on her and set the whole forest on fire. Instead, Rowan cleared his throat. "No, Your Majesty," he said. His voice was stiff. "Lyra is special." A ripple of derisive amusement moved through the Hollow Ridge wolves. Special was a polite word. It meant something is wrong, and we don't want to say it. Kieran's gaze didn't leave Lyra's face. "I see." The strange presence inside her rolled over, more awake now than it had ever been. The hairs on her arms stood on end. "Since I'm here to see the full strength of your pack," Kieran said, "it seems fitting that I see all of it." Let her shift. Lyra's mouth went dry. She could feel the eyes of the pack on her, heavy and expectant. Judgment pressed in from all sides. Her pulse thundered in her ears. If she refused, they'd call her coward. If she tried and failed, they'd see, once and for all, that she truly had nothing. Her father took a half-step forward, lips parting. Aunt Mara touched his arm, stopping him. "You can walk away," Lyra told herself wildly. "You don't owe them this. You can choose not to be their spectacle." But another voice, quieter, buried under years of being talked over, said, "You're tired of running, aren't you?" Lyra drew in a shaky breath. She stepped forward into the very center of the ring. The murmurs rose, then hushed again. The moonlight pooled around her bare feet, pale and cold. The circle of wolves formed a rough wall of fur and eyes and breath. "Close your eyes," Rowan said, almost automatically, echoing the elders from 10 years ago. Lyra did. She had done this 100 times. She did it again. She reached inward, past the embarrassment, past the fear, past the old, familiar shape of the empty door she tried and failed to open 1,000 times. This time, she didn't reach for a wolf that felt like everyone else's. She didn't look for the burning heat, the electric tingling, the sensation of her waiting just under her skin. She reached for that other thing, the quiet, ancient shadow that had stirred in her once under the moonlight of Moonshadow Grove, then fled when she feared it. It was there, not far away, not buried beyond reach. It sat just beneath her awareness, coiled like a tightly wound spring, like a creature in a cave, waiting. Lyra's breath hitched. "I know you're there," she thought at it, feeling more than a little foolish. "I felt you before. I'm not afraid of you." That was a lie. She was terrified. "I'm less afraid of you than I am of this," she admitted to herself, feeling the weight of the watching pack, the looming presence of the Alpha King, the years of whispered useless pressing at her back. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the presence moved. Not away. Toward her. It unfolded, stretching through her bones like the slow uncoiling of something that had been bound for a very long time. It brushed against her mind with a sensation that wasn't quite touch, wasn't quite sound. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing the dark below is not empty. It's full of stars. Lyra gasped. Her knees wobbled. Around her, the ring blurred. She dimly heard someone swear, someone else mutter, "She's fainting." Then the first jolt of pain hit. Not a burning. Not like fire. It was colder, sharper, as if her bones were made of glass and someone was slowly tapping them with a hammer, testing for weaknesses. Her spine arched. Her fingers clawed at the air. The presence inside her surged. Not gentle. Not careful. Hungry. The world narrowed to moonlight and breath, and the pounding of her heart. Somewhere far away, she heard shouting. "She's shifting." Finally, "Spirits, what is that?" Her skin prickled, stretched, crawled. Her senses exploded outward. Every scent in the clearing hit her at once. Sweat, fur, blood, fear, pine, metal, wet earth. Her balance went. She fell to her knees. Once, when she was younger, she'd asked Aunt Mara what it felt like to shift. The older woman had thought for a moment, then said, "Like your bones remember a story your skin forgot, and the only way to tell it is to break." Lyra understood now. Everything inside her was breaking, not apart, out. Heat blasted through her veins, not from fire, but from motion, like a glacier finally starting to move after 1,000 years of stillness. Her jaw ached. Her teeth hurt. Her nails scraped the dirt as her hands warped. She squeezed her eyes shut against the tears of pain. She felt fur, not the soft, uniform coat she'd seen on the others, but something that seemed to shift even as it grew, cool and hot, light and dark, threading over her skin like ink poured into water. At the edge of her awareness, a deep, commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Hold," Kieran said. No one touch her. Lyra's world narrowed further. Her bones snapped, reformed. Her spine stretched. Her shoulders hunched. Her hips cracked. She exhaled, and the sound that left her throat wasn't a human gasp. It was a low, resonant sound that vibrated in her chest and the air around her. Not quite a howl, not quite a growl, like something new. The presence inside her roared. And then, with a final, tearing jolt that sent white light exploding behind her eyes, she was no longer standing on 2 feet. She hit the ground on 4 paws. The ring went utterly, completely silent. Slowly, shaking, Lyra lifted her head. She could see everything. Not the way she had as a human, with edges and shapes and colors. Now the world was sent in sound first. The sharp tang of fear from the wolves nearest her. The steady, ironclad calm radiating from Kieran. The sour twist of shame drifting off Rowan. The bitter lemon of Alara's tightly controlled frustration. She smelled her father's worry like rain. She smelled Aunt Mara's fears, aching hope. Lantern flames crackled louder. Grass whispered under the slightest breeze. Her ears twitched, catching the rustle of leaves in the trees beyond the ring. The scurry of a rodent under a root 20 paces away. She looked down at herself and froze. This was not a wolf she recognized. Her fur was a shifting tapestry of shadow and light, deep black in some places, gleaming silver in others, threaded with faint, pulsing lines that reminded her of the falling stars her mother had once described. Strange pale markings traced up her legs and across her chest, delicate and almost runic. She glowed, subtly, softly, but glow she did, the moonlight catching on her fur and bending around her in strange ways. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Spirits," someone whispered. "What is she?" "A cursed wolf." Another wolf snarled to the mind link, their mental voice sharp with panic. "That's not natural." "Abomination." The word stabbed into Lyra's heightened senses like knives. Her ears flattened against her skull. Shame and fear flooded her, hot and choking. And then, cutting through the chaos of voices, the same commanding presence that had held the crowd back before. "Enough." Kieran's mental voice thundered, slamming into the pack link like a dropped boulder into a pond. The other wolves recoiled instinctively. The mind link quieted. Lyra turned, drawn by that power. The Alpha King had shifted. He stood at the edge of the ring, a massive wolf dark as midnight, streaked with silver along his muzzle and spine. His eyes were the same storm gray as in human form, sharp and clear. Power rolled off him in waves. He stepped into the ring, slow and deliberate. Wolves around him lowered their heads without thinking, throats bared in automatic submission. Even Rowan's wolf form dipped, a low rumble of respect in his chest. Every instinct in Lyra screamed at her to do the same, to drop, to make herself small, to show her throat to the biggest predator in the clearing. The strange power inside her, this ancient, star shadow thing, did not agree. It rose, steady and firm, pressing her paws harder into the ground. Her head stayed up. Her gaze met the Alpha King's and did not break. Gasps rippled through the pack again. She's challenging him. She doesn't know what she's doing. But there was no bared teeth, no raised hackles, no aggression, just refusal to bend in the way everyone expected her to. Kieran studied her, gray eyes narrowed, expression unreadable. For a long, suspended moment, they simply looked at each other, Alpha King and strange, impossible wolf, iron and starlight, fire and shadow. Then, impossibly, he dipped his head, not in submission, in acknowledgement. "You hear them." His voice brushed her mind, startling her. Lyra jerked, ears flicking. This close, his mental tone was clearer, rougher than she'd expected, edged with old, controlled anger and something like tiredness. "What?" She thought back before she could stop herself. "Their fear, their hatred," he said. You hear it as loudly as you hear their breath. Lyra swallowed. I didn't mean to. I don't know what I did. You shifted, Kieran said. There was a dry thread of humor in his tone now, under a full moon, for the first time in front of your pack and an audience of foreign warriors. I'd say you did quite a lot. Despite everything, something in her eased. What am I? She asked, the question tearing out of her. He circled her slowly, taking in every strange line of her coat, every flicker of moonlight, every mark on her paws. Wolves watched, hardly daring to breathe. When he stopped in front of her again, his eyes were different, sharper, more intent. Not cursed, he said, not abomination. His gaze seemed to look through her, past fur and bone, into that deep, coiled something at her core. Ancient, he decided. Old blood, older than these forests. Lyra's heart pounded painfully in her chest. Ancient, old blood. The words meant nothing and everything at once. Out loud, in human speech, Rowan found his voice tight and strained. Your Majesty, we did not know she could. You didn't look, Kieran cut in, shifting his attention away from Lyra at last to fix her alpha with a slicing gaze. His wolf form radiated cold anger. You judged her weakness and forgot that power doesn't always show itself when you expect it to. Rowan flinched. Kieran turned his head slightly toward Lyra again, mind brushing hers once more. Shift back, he said quietly. Panic flared. What if she couldn't? What if she was stuck like this? Star shadow and strange, forever? She tried. She reached for the change the same way she had as a human, searching for the door between forms. The ancient presence inside her resisted. Not cruelly, not out of spite, just unsure, unpracticed. Lyra's breathing hitched. The edges of her vision blurred. Her paws dug into the earth. Breathe, Kieran's voice murmured, lower now. Don't force it. Ask. Ask. Feeling absurd, Lyra did just that. She reached inward toward the coiled, cosmic thing that was apparently her wolf, and thought, please, I need to shift back. Just for now. They're not ready to see you like this. I'm not ready to be this yet. The presence rippled. Considered, then, with a sensation like a nod, it softened. The world tilted again. Pain lanced through her, but it was duller this time, less like shattering and more like rearranging. Fur flowed backward, bones shrank, paws became hands. Lyra crashed to her knees in the dirt, human again, gasping. A cloak hit her shoulders a moment later. Someone's, thrown quickly, and she clutched around herself with shaking hands. When she lifted her head, Kieran was still watching her. He looked. Lyra realized with a jolt, not triumphant, not surprised. He looked satisfied. So, he said into the stunned silence of the gathered pack, his voice calm but carrying like thunder. You call her useless? No one answered. The word, one so casually thrown around, now hung in the air like an accusation. Kieran's gaze swept over the Hollow Ridge wolves, slow and cutting. You have a starborn in your ranks, he said, letting the unfamiliar word fall with deliberate weight. And you buried her in kitchens. Lyra's breath caught on that same word. Starborn. Her skin prickled. The pack murmured, confused and afraid. Impossible, Corin choked out. Those are myths. Myths don't stand in front of me with the moon in their blood. Kieran snapped, his patience finally showing crack. Old blood has returned, and you were too blind to see it. He turned back to Lyra. I have seen many wolves, he said, and this time his voice was quieter. But I have never seen one like you. Lyra, still on her knees in the moonlit ring, cloak clutched around her, stared up at the Alpha King. Her whole life, she had been the girl who wouldn't shift. Tonight, under a watching moon and the harsh eyes of her pack, she had. And whatever she had become, it was not something they had a name for. Not yet. Later, Lyra would struggle to remember exactly how the ring emptied. One moment. She was on her knees in the dirt, cloak clenched in shaking fingers, Kieran's words hanging in the air like smoke. You have a starborn in your ranks. The next, the circle of wolves seemed to blur and shift. Some retreated with averted eyes. Others stared openly, curiosity and fear warring in their faces. The air crackled with whispers. Starborn. Impossible. Did you see her fur? Not natural. Not right. Her father cut through the crowd like an arrow. Lyra. She flinched at the sound of her own name. He reached her in 3 strides, dropping into a crouch, hand hovering just above her shoulders as if afraid to hurt her. Are you hurt? His voice shook. Can you move? Look at me. She forced herself to. His eyes were blown wide, a storm of relief and fear, and something like awe churning behind them. She searched his face for disgust, for fear of her, and found none. That undid her more than anything. Her voice came out raw, shredded from the sounds that had torn out of her throat. I don't know. Everything aches. That's normal for first shift, Aunt Mara said grimly, appearing at his shoulder, though most first shifts don't try to turn themselves inside out in front of half the realm. She held out a calloused hand. Lyra took it. Her fingers were trembling so badly she almost missed. Together, they got her to her feet. The world swayed. Her legs felt like wet clay. Easy, her father murmured. He slipped an arm around her, solid and steady. I've got you. Lyra's head spun with leftover scents and sounds. The wolves around the ring seemed too bright, too loud. Even in human form, her senses hadn't entirely settled. She could still hear the rapid heartbeat of a pup hiding behind his mother's legs, still smell the tang of iron in the beta's clenched jaw. On the raised platform, Kieran watched silently. Rowan turned toward him, throat bobbing. Your Majesty, he began, voice strained, this revelation. Kieran descended from the platform in a few long strides, his cloak whispering around his boots. His expression had cooled back into that unreadable stillness Lyra had already started to recognize. Elders, he said, without looking away from Rowan. We'll talk in your hall. Now. Rowan's mouth tightened, but he nodded. Of course. Illyra's gaze flicked to Lyra, sharp and assessing and almost calculating. Then she turned on her heel and followed her mate and the king. Take her to the healers, Aunt Mara muttered to Lyra's father. If she falls over in front of them, they'll start debating whether to call her a miracle or an omen before she hits the floor. I'm right here, Lyra rasped. Yes, Aunt Mara said, and they're all suddenly remembering that fact. Come on. As they led her away, Lyra felt the weight of 100 stares on her back. Some were afraid, some envious. A few, very few, were awed. Cade stood near the edge of the dispersing crowd, still in wolf form, his golden fur bristled, ears pinned. His eyes tracked Lyra, a strange mixture of anger and something else in them. That shouldn't be her, his look said, clear as if he'd spoken. That should be me. Lyra looked away. The healer's hut sat slightly apart from the others, half-wrapped in climbing vines. It smelled of dried herbs and clean cloth, and a faint undercurrent of blood. Put her there, the healer, Bran, ordered, pointing to the low pallet near the wall. He was a thick-shouldered man with gentle hands, his once dark hair almost entirely white now. And don't hover. Lyra's father ignored the last part, hovering anyway as she lowered herself onto the pallet with a groan. Every muscle in her body protested. Her skin felt too tight. Her ribs ached. Tell me where it hurts, Bran said, already prodding gently at her arms, checking for breaks that hadn't set right. Everywhere, she said honestly, but mostly here. She pressed a hand to her chest. Feels like something's still moving. Bran listened to her heartbeat with his head cocked, eyes half-lidded. First shift often leaves your insides arguing about what they are. Human, wolf, both, neither. It'll settle. Is it? Her father cleared his throat. Is it normal? For whatever she is. Bran shot him a sideways look. I've never seen a starborn before, he said dryly. So you tell me what normal is. Lyra flinched at the word again. Starborn. It felt too big to fit in her, like a coat 3 sizes too large. Bran must have seen something on her face, because his voice softened. Pain is normal, he said. Lightheadedness. Sensory overload. You shifted hard. You'll feel wrung out. But your bones are where they should be, and your heart is strong. His mouth quirked just a little. You're not dying. That's good, Lyra managed. Her father let out a slow breath and sat on the edge of the pallet, his shoulders sagging. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if trying to memorize his version of her, the same daughter, but not. You did it, he said softly. You shifted. The child inside her, who had stood in the ring at 8 years old, tears in her eyes, being called useless. That girl broke a little more at the simple pride in his voice. I did, she whispered. Eventually. And not like anyone expected. Aunt Mara added from the doorway. She leaned on her staff, eyes sharp. Good. Expectations are boring. Lyra huffed a weak laugh. Then the laugh caught in her chest, tangled with a dozen questions that had no edges yet. What if they're right? She blurted. What if I am wrong? Cursed. Dangerous. Her father's expression hardened. You are not cursed. You saw my fur, she shot back, a tremor in her voice. That wasn't normal. They all smelled it. Saw it. I could feel them thinking I was wrong. Aunt Mara pushed off the doorframe and limped closer, her staff ticking softly against the floor. Listen to me, pup, she said. There are many words for different. Some are kinder than others. But different doesn't mean wrong. It just means rare. Rare things get hunted, Lyra said before she could stop herself. Or hoarded, or broken to fit. Aunt Mara's eyes flickered, some memory passing behind them. Sometimes, she admitted, but sometimes they change the shape of the world instead. Lyra didn't know what to say to that. Her father reached out, brushing a strand of hair back from her forehead like he had when she was small. His hand trembled. Let them say what they will, he murmured. They said you were useless today. Tomorrow they'll say something else. None of that changes what you are. And what is that? Lyra asked, voice barely audible. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, for once. He didn't seem to have an answer ready. Bran, busy mixing something in a small clay bowl, snorted. Apparently, he said, you're starborn. The word hung in the hut like incense. Lyra swallowed. What does that even mean? She whispered. Aunt Mara traded a look with Bran. Old stories, she said finally. Older than this pack. Older than most packs. From when wolves were still figuring out where they ended and the moon began. Lyra blinked. I thought those were just tales for pups. Most tales for pups start as warning for adults, Aunt Mara said. We just forget that part. Bran approached with a bowl and a wooden spoon. Drink, he told Lyra. It'll help with the aches. She took the bowl and sniffed cautiously. This smells like boiled socks. Boiled socks don't cost me 3 nights in the hills searching for the right root, he muttered. Drink. She drank. It tasted worse than it smelled. As she choked it down, footsteps thudded outside. A shadow loomed in the doorway. Lyra. Rowan's voice. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, Illyra at his shoulder. Their scents were tense, sweat and sharp edges and metallic tang of frayed pride. Alpha, Bran said stiffly, stepping back. Rowan's gaze swept the room, landing on Lyra, then her father, then Aunt Mara. The king wants to speak with her, he said. Lyra's stomach dropped. He can wait, her father snapped, standing. She just shifted for the first time. She needs rest. Rowan's jaw tightened. He insisted. Illyra's eyes were cool as winter. Do you intend to tell the Alpha King of the realm he must be patient? She asked. I'm sure that will end well. Lyra pushed herself upright, ignoring the protesting burn in her muscles. I can walk, she said hoarsely. It's fine. It's not, her father began. It is, she cut in. For once, both men fell silent. She swung her legs over the side of the pallet and stood. The room tilted mildly, then steadied. She held on to the edge of the bed until her balance caught up. I'll go, she said. It's not like he didn't just see everything already. Aunt Mara's mouth twitched, unhappy but resigned. We'll be nearby, she murmured. If he grows fangs, I'll hit him with my staff. Lyra managed a ghost of a smile at that. Rowan gestured toward the door. Come, he said. Lyra followed him out into the night, her father close behind despite the warning glance Illyra shot him. The hall felt different now. The tables had been pushed back. The candles burned lower. The air was thick with the remnants of food and sweat, and the faint burnt sweet scent of spilled wine. A few warriors lingered along the walls, but most had been dismissed. At the far end of the hall, near the speaking stone that had been dragged inside for formality, Kieran stood with 3 of his warriors and 2 Hollow Ridge elders. A map was unrolled across the table between them, marked with stones and ink. As Lyra entered, their conversation fractured. If the rogues push through Green Pine's southern border, they'll funnel straight toward this valley, one of the high mountain wolves was saying. The pass is... He broke off, eyes landing on Lyra. Kieran turned. Lyra suddenly wanted to shrink, to fold herself into cloak until only a shadow remained. She stepped forward anyway. The Alpha King's gaze swept over her. Taking it away, she was holding herself, the pallor in her face, the stubborn set of her jaw. He dismissed his warriors with a slight tilt of his head. Give us a moment. They filed out without argument. Even Rowan and Alara hesitated. I'd prefer to stay, Rowan began. Kieran's brow arched. Do you think I'm going to attack one of your wolves in your own hall, Alpha Rowan? Rowan flushed. Of course not. I won't be long, Kieran said, voice calm but leaving no room for debate. After a brief, taut silence, Rowan inclined his head and backed away. Alara followed, her expression sour. The door thudded shut behind them. Lyra suddenly became acutely aware that she was alone with the Alpha King in a room big enough to hold 3 packs. He turned his full attention on her. Come closer, he said. Her legs carried her forward of their own accord. She stopped a few paces away, heart hammering. I'm not going to bite you, he added dryly. That's good, she said, then immediately wished she'd said something more intelligent. One corner of his mouth twitched. Sit, if you like, he said, gesturing to the bench near the table. You're still unsteady. She sat. Pride could lose this battle. Her knees were winning. For a moment, he just looked at her, not like an alpha assessing a warrior's fitness, not like a wolf sizing up prey, like a man cataloging something precious and dangerous he'd thought lost. What does it feel like, he asked finally, your shift? Lyra blinked. Painful, she said, because that part was easy. Loud. Too much. Like my skin was a story written wrong, and my bones were trying to rewrite it. His eyes sharpened slightly, and before the pain, she hesitated. It would be easy to lie, to say it felt like everyone always described. The familiar burning, the tug, the simple opening of a door. But something in his gaze told her he'd know. Cold, she admitted. Like something old waking up. Big. Heavy. It didn't feel like a wolf, not at first. More like, she groped for words. Like a night sky in the shape of a heartbeat. A long silence followed. Kieran's expression changed, almost imperceptibly. The hard lines around his mouth eased. His shoulders loosened, just a fraction. Starborn, he said again, more to himself this time than to her. No doubt about it. Lyra swallowed. You keep saying that. What does it mean? He studied her for another beat, weighing something unseen, then said, What do your elders say it means? Pup stories, she said. Old tales. Wolves born under falling stars who could speak to the moon, who could bend things, change fate. She snorted softly. Everyone says those are just metaphors. Lessons about responsibility. They're not, Kieran said quietly. Her skin prickled. So they're true? Some of them, he said. Some are exaggerations. Most are softened. Time makes teeth into fairy lights. Why? She asked. If Starborn are real, why pretend they're not? He gave a humorless huff. Because the last time our kind saw one, 2 factions spent 20 years trying either crown them or kill them. Wars are easier to start when you add prophecy to fear. Lyra stared. So they hid them in stories, he continued. Turned them into distant myths. Safer that way. No one panics over fairy tale. Until one walks into their ring, Lyra said weakly. Exactly. She tried to process that. Failed. Filed it away for later panic. You said Starborn like it was a category, she said slowly. Plural. Have you seen others? His gaze shuddered, memories drawing a veil over his eyes. Once, he said, a long time ago. And, she pressed despite herself. And, he said, voice roughening almost imperceptibly. They were not trained. They were feared. Used. It ended badly. The way he said badly made the small hairs on her arms rise. He shook himself, as if throwing off the weight of old ghosts. When he looked at her again, his eyes were sharp and present. I won't let that happen again, he said. Lyra blinked. To who? She asked, thrown. To you, he said simply. The words landed like a stone in her chest. You don't even know me, she blurted. I know enough, he countered. I know you hid in kitchens instead of battle rings. I know your pack looked at you and saw a lack where there was only latency. I know you stood in front of them and me and didn't break when your bones did. That's not, she faltered. I was terrified. So was I. The first time I killed a man, he said. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about what you do while your heart is trying to claw out of your throat. That shut her up. He leaned back against the table, crossing his arms. You're Wolf, he said. Have you spoken with him? Lyra frowned. Spoken how? In words. Some starborn hear their wolves differently, he said. Images, emotions, patterns, not just instincts. She hesitated. Thinking back to the clearing years ago, to the sensation of eyes in the dark, to the way the presence inside her had responded when she'd asked it to let her change back. Not exactly words, she said slowly, but something. When I asked it to let me shift back, it felt like it weighed the choice, like it understood. Then it agreed. His gaze sharpened. Agreed, he repeated. Not obeyed. She nodded. Good, he murmured. Good, she echoed. Everyone else thinks that's terrifying. They don't understand what you are, he said simply. They see power they can't control and call it cursed. Typical. His eyes cooled. They have no idea what they almost threw away. Anger flickered along the edges of his scent, sharp and metallic. Not at her. At them. Lyra swallowed. You said old blood. Her voice came out small. Does that mean something else is in me that shouldn't be? He shook his head. It means your blood remembers further back than theirs, he said. Back, before we smooth the rough edges off what we are. The moon touches all wolves. It grabbed hold of you a little harder. That's one way to put being turned inside out, she muttered. The corner of his mouth tugged upward again. You're handling this better than I expected. No, I'm not, she said honestly. I'm just too numb to panic properly. That will come later, he said. Tonight and tomorrow and the night after. That's comforting. It's honest. She couldn't argue with that. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The hall's distant sounds, muffled voices outside, the crackle of the banked fire, filled the space. What happens now? Lyra whispered. He studied her for a long moment. Now, he said, I finish assessing this pack. I decide what they can give, what they can keep, and what they have already proven they don't deserve. Her pulse skittered. And me? She asked. His gaze didn't waver. You, he said, need training, discipline, knowledge. Without that, your power will either consume you or someone will try to do it for you. A cold thread of fear traced her spine. We will speak more in the morning, he added, pushing away from the table. After you've slept? After I've decided how best to keep you alive? She flinched at that last word. Alive? She echoed. Starborn attract trouble, he said. Always have. Too many people want to own what they don't understand. Lyra thought of the way some of her pack had looked at her, like a weapon, like a threat. She thought of Cade's furious, hungry eyes. Do you? She asked before she could stop herself. Want to own it? He went very still. Then, slowly, he shook his head. No, he said. I have enough chains to manage. I don't need another. The faintest hint of something like weariness brushed his scent again. Old burdens. Old wars. I will not lie to you, he added. I will use what you are. I'd be a fool not to. But there's a difference between using and owning. You'll learn it. if you stay upright long enough. Staying upright is a general plan, she said faintly. Good. He straightened fully. Go back to your healer. Sleep. Tomorrow at first light, I want to see you try to shift again. She stared. Tomorrow? Already? You think the rogues and whatever is stirring up this mess will wait for you to get comfortable in your skin? He asked. Power grows sloppy if you don't shape it. You don't have the luxury of taking this slow. A flare of stubbornness rose in her chest. And if I say no? He considered her. Then you prove you'd rather stay what they called you, he said calmly. Useless. Burden. I don't think that's who you are. But you'll decide that, not me. The word useless tasted different now. Not like a brand. Like a dare. Lyra took a breath. I'll be there, she said. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Of course you will, he said. You're starborn. You were never going to stay in the kitchen. The night felt sharper when she stepped back outside. The air was cool and damp. Crickets sang. The moon floated high and bright. The settlement had quieted. Most wolves had retreated to their huts, though small knots still whispered near the central fire. Her father was waiting by the hall door. How bad was it? He demanded, scanning her face as if expecting new wounds. I'm not dead, she said. He didn't eat me. Aunt Mara doesn't have to hit him with her staff. Aunt Mara, leaning against a nearby post, snorted. Shame. Her father huffed out a laugh that sounded half relieved, half hysterical. What did he want? To see what my insides felt like, Lyra said, and to tell me I'm going to be very tired from now on. Her father's brows knit. What does that? He wants me to shift again at dawn, she said. Says I need training. Silence. Then Aunt Mara let out a long breath. He's right, she said softly. You do. Her father turned on her. You approve of this? Yes, Aunt Mara said simply. Someone has to teach her how to carry what she is without cracking in half. Would you rather be some power-drunk elder with half the king's discipline? He clenched his jaw, looking back at Lyra. Worry, pride, and helplessness warred on his face. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, he said. I don't care if he's the Alpha King or the moon itself. If you want to hide in our hut and never shift again, I'll bar the door. Lyra's chest squeezed. 10 years ago, she would have taken that offer and clung to it like a lifeline. Now, it felt like another kind of cage. I don't want to hide anymore, she said quietly. I'm tired of pretending there's nothing in me just because it scares everyone that there is. He flinched. She reached out, catching his hand. I'm scared too, she added. But I think I'd be more afraid of going back to how it was. Pretending. Shrinking. Slowly, his fingers curled around hers, rough and warm. I'll be there, he said hoarsely. At dawn. Watching. I know, she said. Aunt Mara pushed off the post. Enough heavy talk, she said gruffly. Your bones just try to rearrange themselves in front of a crowd. You need sleep and food. My stomach disagrees, Lyra muttered, but she let them steer her back toward the healer's hut. Sleep came in fits. Every time Lyra closed her eyes, her body remembered the pain of shifting. Her muscles twitched. Her jaw ached with phantom pressure. Worse were the flashes behind her eyes. Not dreams. Exactly. Images. A forest under a sky, so full of stars it looked like poured silver. Wolves made of light streaking between trees. A river running backward. Its water a spill of constellations. A pair of eyes in the dark. Vast, patient, bright with something older than words. Her wolf. Every time she tried to look directly at it, the image shifted, slipping just out of focus. Not teasing. Not cruel. Just too big to fit her small human gaze. At some point, she gave up on sleep entirely. The hut was dim. The banked fire cast faint, guttering shadows across the ceiling. Bran snored softly in a chair near the far wall. Lyra slid quietly from the pallet, moving slowly so her creaking joints didn't wake him. Barefoot, she stepped outside. The night had cooled further. The grass was damp with dew, chilling her toes. The moon had rolled westward, lower now, but still bright enough to paint everything in shades of silver and shadow. She didn't consciously choose a direction. Her feet found a path to Moon Shadow Grove on their own. The forest welcomed her with familiar sounds. The rustle of leaves, the creak of old trunks, the distant gurgle of a stream. Every noise seemed louder now, each scent sharper. Her senses hadn't fully settled back to human range. Part of her wondered if they ever would. She stepped into the small clearing and stopped. The grove was exactly as she remembered it. The circle of soft grass, the ring of ancient trees, the column of moonlight pouring down into the center like a blessing. It also contained something new. Kieran stood at the edge of the clearing, half in shadow. He had shed his cloak. In the moonlight, his bare arms and throat showed lean muscle and a map of scars. He looked less like a king here and more like a wolf-shaped man who'd chosen flesh for convenience. He lifted his head as she stepped into the clearing, nostrils flaring. "You walk loudly," he said. "I'm barefoot," she said, "and you're standing in my thinking spot." His brow ticked up. "Your thinking spot. That what it's called?" She shrugged, suddenly awkward. "I come here when I need to yell at the moon in private." "And tonight?" he asked. "What do you need to yell?" She considered. "I haven't decided yet," she said. "Something between why me and thank you, probably. That's quite a range." "I'm complicated," she deadpanned. He huffed a quiet laugh, then sobered. "I didn't mean to intrude on your thinking spot," he said. "My wolves are restless around your settlement. It's hard for me to breathe in enclosed spaces. I walk when I can't sleep." She believed him. There was a restlessness in his posture that hadn't been there earlier, a tension along his shoulders like a bowstring pulled tight and never fully released. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just full. Lyra moved a little further into the clearing, tipping her face up to the moon. Its light felt different now, sharper against her skin, warmer. "You're glowing," Kieran said suddenly. She blinked and looked down. "What?" He nodded toward her arms. "Not as much as when you shifted, but your aura hasn't settled. It's humming." "Is that bad?" "It's unusual," he said. "Most wolves' energy pulls inward when they sleep. Yours is still reaching." "Reaching for what?" she muttered. "Maybe for the rest of you," he said. She huffed. After a moment, she asked quietly, Did anyone else ever call you useless? Before you weren't." He frowned. "Before I wasn't what?" "Alpha," she said. "King. Whatever you are now." A shadow crossed his face. "My father thought I was soft," he said. "Too thoughtful. Too inclined to question tradition. In his mind, that was as bad as useless." "What changed?" she asked. "I stopped asking for his approval," he said simply, "and started demanding better myself." He glanced at her. "And when he died, I was the only option left, whether anyone liked it or not." "That sounds lonely." "It was," he said. "It still is." Lyra looked back up at the moon. "I've been useless for 10 years, she said softly. "At least." That's what everyone decided. "I thought if I ever shifted, it would fix that." She laughed once, bitter. "Joke's on me, I guess. Now I'm not useless. I'm an omen." "You're not an omen," he said. "Starborn, then," she said. "Whatever that demands." "Responsibility," he said. "And choices. Neither of which you lacked before." "You make it sound simple," she muttered. "It's not," he said. "But it is straightforward." He looked at her fully now, his gaze steady. "You can't go back to who you were yesterday, Lyra. The moment you stepped into that ring, that path closed." Her throat tightened. "I know," she whispered. "You can cling to what they called you," he went on. "Let their fear define you. Or you could decide what Starborn means. For you, not for the packs, not for the old stories. For you." She thought of her father's face when she shifted, of Aunt Mara's fierce gaze, of Cade's anger, of Alara's sharp calculation. She thought of the way her wolf had paused when she'd asked it to let her shift back, the way it had chosen. "I don't even know who me is yet," she said, "let alone what that title should mean." "Then chapter 1 starts at dawn," he said, "when you shift again." "That's a terrible opening," she said. "Needs more disaster." He smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. It transformed his face, taking 10 years off and adding something like light. "Oh, there will be disaster," he said dryly. "You're starborn. It's inevitable." She rolled her eyes, but the knot in her chest loosened a little. They stood in silence for a while, sharing the clearing. Two shapes under the same moon, the air around them humming with things not yet said. Above, the stars watched. Below, in her bones, something old stretched again, curious. Lyra closed her eyes and reached, not for the empty door of old attempts, but for the vast, starlit presence she now knew was hers. It stirred. This time, when she touched it, it didn't recoil. Instead, she felt interest, a flicker of amusement, a strange, quiet pride. "I don't know your name." She thought at it, half ashamed. "I don't even know what to call you." In response, an image bloomed behind her eyes. A wolf made of night and light, standing alone on a ridge, every star in the sky reflected in its fur. It threw back its head and howled, not in loneliness, but in defiance and joy. The sound shook the world. Lyra's breath caught. Then the image faded, leaving a single, clear feeling behind. Not helpless. Not anymore. She opened her eyes. Kieran was watching her, curiosity written across his features. "Well, she doesn't have a name yet," Lyra said quietly. "But she's not scared." "Good," he said. "Of anything," Lyra added, "which is inconvenient." He huffed a laugh. "You'll balance each other." "Assuming I don't get drowned in prophecy before then," she muttered. "That," Kieran said, "is why you're not staying here." She stiffened, turning to stare at him, but he just pushed off the tree, straightening. "Dawn," he reminded her, "don't make me drag you out of your healer's hut." With that, he walked past her, heading back toward the settlement, leaving her alone in the silver-lit grove. Lyra stood there for a long time, heart pounding. Not staying here. The words echoed. He hadn't said where she would be staying. Not yet. That conversation waited for dawn and for Chapter 4. For now. She stood in her thinking spot, the moon on her face, the forest breathing around her, her nameless wolf awake and listening. They had called her useless. Tonight, for the first time, she believed she might be anything but. Dawn arrived like a blade through cloud. Pale gold light stretched across the forest, gilding branches and rooftops, spilling into the Hollow Ridge clearing like a promise or a warning. Smoke from breakfast fires curled into the still air. Birds stirred, their songs tentative, as if sensing that the day held something more than just morning. Lyra stood at the edge of the training ring barefoot, dew soaking into the hem of her borrowed cloak. She hadn't slept, not truly. She dozed for a few minutes at a time, her thoughts a churn of questions and sparks. Her wolf, still nameless, still half strange, had hovered just under her skin all night, pacing silently. Awake, alert, waiting. Across the ring stood Kieran Thorne. The Alpha King wore no armor this morning, just a simple tunic of dark gray, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, his hair tied back neatly. He looked more like a seasoned warrior than a monarch, but the air around him still hummed with restrained power. His presence bent the clearing, reshaping its center of gravity. Two of his high mountain wolves stood nearby, silent and watchful. One male, one female, both deadly-looking, lean and scarred. Their eyes never left Lyra. She squared her shoulders under their gaze. Rowan, Ilara, and a few others had arrived moments before, keeping a cautious distance. Most of the Hollow Ridge pack had not yet woken. Or perhaps they simply hadn't been invited. This wasn't a public performance. It was a reckoning. "Ready?" Kieran asked. Lyra gave a short nod. "As I'll ever be." "No pressure," the male warrior muttered. "You only have the future of our kind riding on your ability to not explode." "Run," Kieran said without looking. "Shut up." Run, mime zipping his mouth shut. The female next to him rolled her eyes. Lyra exhaled through her nose. Nice to know sarcasm's not a lost art up north. "High Mountain isn't dead," the female muttered. "Just disciplined." Kieran stepped forward, cutting off further commentary. "You shifted last night in a surge," he said, "guided by panic and instinct. That's expected. Most first shifts are chaos. But you don't have that luxury anymore. I got that impression, Lyra muttered. His lips twitched. Today, he continued, you'll shift with intention. Slowly, consciously, you'll feel every part of it. I'm already tired. Good. Tired wolves make fewer mistakes. They rely on what's real. Lyra snorted. You're really good at pep talks, you know that? I'm good at making sure people survive, he said, which is what I intend to help you do. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. This will hurt, he said. Not like last time. Not because it's wrong. But because power always costs something, and you've waited 10 years to pay. Lyra swallowed hard. Kieran stepped back. Begin when you're ready. When you're ready. She wasn't, but she stepped into the ring anyway. The air was cool and wet. Her feet pressed into familiar dirt, and the ring, which had once felt like a place of humiliation, now felt hollow. Waiting. She closed her eyes. The silence grew deep. She reached inside, not toward the door the elders once described, not toward the borrowed wisdom of old wolves, but toward her, the strange, star-shadow thing curled just beneath her ribs, already awake. Are you ready? She thought. A warm surge of acknowledgement moved through her. Not obedience, not submission. Agreement. They would do this together. She didn't force the shift. She invited it. The change began in her chest, as though her heart had outgrown its cage. Bones cracked and bent. Skin rippled. Her jaw throbbed. This time, though, she didn't panic. She didn't fight it. She rode it. And the pain, though sharp, was cleaner, like fire that cauterized instead of burned. She dropped to all fours, paws hitting the earth with a sense of rightness that sent tears stinging the corners of her eyes. Her fur bloomed across her body in rippling streaks of black, silver, and gleaming threads of iridescent blue. The strange markings, like ancient runes, glowed faintly across her shoulders and back. She looked like she'd stepped out of the night sky and into a wolf skin. Gasps broke the silence. She turned toward the source. More had gathered than she'd thought. Dozens of wolves now lined the ring's edge, packmates roused by whispers and curiosity. The pups clung to their mothers. Warriors crossed their arms. Elders stood stiff with unreadable expressions. And there, near the back, her father. He didn't look afraid. He looked proud. The fire in Lyra's chest surged. Kieran circled into view, shifted now into his enormous silver-streaked wolf form. He approached slowly, tail low in a show of respect, not dominance. You hear me? His mind brushed hers. Yes, she replied, surprised by how clear her thoughts were in this form. Then follow me. They ran, around the ring, through the trees, over the rise near the northern ridge. Kieran didn't go easy on her. He pushed her, testing her stamina, her control, her strength. Her paws hit the earth in a rhythm that echoed in her chest. Alive, alive, alive. She leapt a fallen log with a surge of power that left the ground trembling. Her senses drank in the world, every leaf, every motion, every breath of wind. Kieran turned sharply and she followed, not hesitating. Your stride is clean, he said, but your rear paw drags a little when you bank left. Sorry, she grunted. Don't apologize. Correct it. She adjusted. At the river, he stopped. They drank, panting. Their reflections shimmered in the water. His steady and solid, hers strange and glowing. Kieran shifted first, human again in seconds. Lyra followed, the transition easier now, though her body still trembled with the aftershock. They sat on a boulder above the water, breathing hard. You're not just starborn, he said eventually. You're fast, smart, adaptable. You sound surprised. I'm not. He glanced sideways, but I needed to see it. Silence. Then Lyra asked, You said I'm not staying. What did you mean? Kieran leaned back on his palms. Exactly what it sounds like. You can't stay here. This pack cannot train you. They will hold you back, even if they don't mean to. Fear does that. Her stomach twisted. My father will be protected and respected. I already offered Rowan better trade routes and high mountain hunting rights in exchange for you. Lyra blinked. You traded for me? Don't make that face, he said dryly. You're not livestock. I could have taken you by right of power, but I offered terms. It matters. She looked away. So I'm part of an alliance now. You were always more than that, he said. But yes, officially you're coming with me. You'll live at High Mountain. You'll train. You'll learn. You'll survive. And if I don't want that, he shrugged, then stay here. Shrink again. Wait for the next pack to come hunting for power and decide you're a prize. She didn't reply. He waited. Then he said quieter, You asked if I wanted to own you. I don't. But I will claim you if it means no one else gets to turn you into a weapon. Lyra looked at him sharply. That's the same thing. No, he said. It's not. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. Finally, Lyra whispered, I don't want to be a weapon. Kieran nodded. Then let's make you something else. She met his gaze. Promise me one thing, she said. Name it. That I won't become something worse than what they feared. His expression shifted. Less steel, more man. More human. I won't let you, he said.